You're listening to Dark Rain Chronicles. The rain hides many things, but it also remembers. Secrets washed away, voices swallowed by the storm. These are the stories it brings back, and tonight, you will hear them. Silas. Even now, the memory glints sharp. The flea market, that mirror. I was meandering through aisles choked with forgotten histories. Brittle-spined books, oxidized tools, porcelain figures bearing the scars of time. When it snagged my attention. There, nestled beneath a tangle of mismatched jewel cases, it lay unassuming. Its metal frame bore a patina of neglect, the tiny clasp hanging loose. Yet, something resonated, a low thrum of insistence that halted me mid-stride. A peculiar compulsion bloomed, a need to possess it. Before conscious thought could intervene, my hand had closed around its cool weight. The proprietor, a gaunt man whose face was a roadmap of wrinkles, offered a curt nod as I held it up. His words were sparse, merely stating the price with an air of utter indifference. The coins exchanged hands. I slid the mirror into my pocket, turning away from the stall. An unfamiliar constriction tightened in my chest. Not the flutter of excitement, but a sudden, taut apprehension. Fatigue, I reasoned, dismissing the sensation. Later that afternoon, returning to the confines of my third-floor apartment, a space perpetually shadowed by peeling wallpaper in one corner, dominated by a sagging couch and a cheap television stand, all accessed via a groaning, temperamental elevator. I tossed the mirror onto the coffee table. It landed with a soft thud, promptly forgotten amidst the day's accumulated exhaustion. I remember collapsing onto the couch, the springs sighing beneath me, utterly spent. Only deep into the night did the mirror reclaim my thoughts. Preparing for bed, I saw it resting there, catching the weak glow from the standing lamp. A faint disquiet emanated from it. Logic dictated stowing it away, yet I left it exposed. After brushing my teeth, I found myself drawn back to the couch. I picked it up, the worn latch yielding easily. The glass inside was clouded, perhaps minutely scratched. My own reflection surfaced first, hair disheveled, eyes shadowed with weariness. Then, a fleeting disturbance flickered in the periphery behind my image. I spun around, heart quickening, but the cramped living room was empty, still. Shaking my head, attributing the anomaly to dust or distorted antique glass, I polished the surface with the hem of my shirt. Looking again revealed only my familiar countenance. I snapped it shut and retreated to bed. The following day unfurled in a blur of errands and overdue work. The mirror remained an inert object on the table, ignored until evening descended. Following a hastily consumed dinner, I sank onto the couch, an inexplicable magnetism pulling my attention back to the small artifact. Why I felt compelled to open it again, I couldn't say. The urge simply existed. As my thumb released the latch, a distinct coolness traced the nape of my neck. My reflection stared back, seated as I was, yet something felt profoundly wrong. Behind my mirrored self lingered an amorphous darkness, less a defined shadow cast by furniture, more an indistinct smear, an outline resisting identification. I pivoted, searching the room. Nothing. Returning my gaze to the mirror, the aberration had vanished. A tremor ran through me, my heart beginning a heavier cadence. Not quite fear, but a palpable tension seized my muscles. I closed the mirror decisively, setting it aside, opting for the distraction of television. Yet, my eyes kept straying towards it, a morbid curiosity warring with a growing unease, preventing me from opening it again just then. In the days that followed, my interactions with the mirror became deliberate, almost ritualistic. Each time I peered into its depths, the reflection offered something new, unsettling. My own face remained constant, but the space behind me held a persistent phantom, a patch of deepening shadow. It occupied the same region of the glass, but seemed to coalesce, gaining definition with every viewing. Anxiety became my unwelcome companion. Holding the mirror sent prickles across my palms, tightened my chest, quickened my breath. I clung to rational explanations, tricks of aged glass, optical quirks, but the way the shadows seemed to respond defied easy dismissal. One afternoon, tilting my head experimentally, the shadowed outline in the mirror shifted in mimicry, lagging just a fraction of a second behind my own movement. A genuine chill snaked down my spine. Attempting to regain control, I relegated the mirror to the obscurity of a bedroom drawer. But escape proved illusory. One evening, a flicker of movement in the living room window drew my eye. Darkness pressed against the glass from outside, while the interior lights cast my reflection clearly upon its surface. My face, my shoulders, and then, hovering behind me, that same smudged silhouette, possessing the same vague height and human-like form. I whirled around, adrenaline surging, fully expecting an intruder. The apartment was empty. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sweat beaded on my forehead. Turning back to the window, the shape was gone. I stood there gasping for air, suspended in a moment of pure, unadulterated panic. Driven by a frantic need for confirmation, I rushed to the bedroom, wrenching open the drawer. My fingers fumbled with the mirror's latch. It sprang open. The shape materialized instantly in the reflection, stark against the dim backdrop. This time, it possessed nascent features, two darker concentrations within the shadow, chillingly suggestive of eyes. They seemed fixed upon me, imbued with a cold, vacant scrutiny. I slammed the mirror shut with convulsive force. My hands trembled violently. Seeking an anchor, I called Marcus. I skirted the truth, mentioning only stress, a general malaise. He proposed drinks, a welcome offer of noise and distraction, but I declined, citing fatigue. The refusal felt strange, rooted perhaps in embarrassment, or maybe a nascent fear of leaving the apartment unguarded. The rest of the evening dissolved into restless pacing, scrutinizing every corner, peering into closets, a futile exercise against the certainty of my solitude. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and fractured. Morning brought a fragile resolve. I forced myself through the motions, dressing for work, a perfunctory breakfast, the walk to the office building. Sunlight and the city's clamor offered a temporary balm, almost convincing me the preceding night had been a product of an overwrought imagination. Then, traversing the lobby, I passed a wall clad in polished metal panels. My reflection slid across the gleaming surface. For a heartbeat, it was just me. Then, keeping pace behind my mirrored form, the shape manifested. I froze mid-stride. My skin prickled. My pulse became a frantic drum against my eardrums. I remained transfixed, staring, until a voice behind me inquired if I was all right. Murmuring a reassurance, I fled towards the elevator, the terrifying thought crystallizing. I was losing my grip on reality. The workday was an exercise in controlled panic. Every reflective surface became a potential portal for dread. I studiously avoided my own gaze, even sidestepping the bathroom mirror for hours. When necessity finally drove me there, I focused intently on the running water, the basin's porcelain curve. Yet, peripherally, I registered it, a dark, ephemeral figure hovering at the edge of the mirror's frame. It was faint, almost subliminal, but undeniably present. I exited the restroom with unnerving haste. My commute home included an unplanned detour to a hardware store. A desperate strategy began to form. I purchased duct tape, heavy duty, and a small, lockable metal box. Back in the dubious sanctuary of my apartment, I swaddled the mirror in an old towel, bound it tightly with layers of tape until it resembled a crude parcel, and secured it within the box. The click of the lock offered a small measure of solace. I shoved the container beneath my bed, whispering a mantra. Out of sight, out of mind. For a brief interlude, the tactic seemed effective. That evening, windows and chrome fixtures reflected only the mundane. Relief washed over me, potent and welcome. I ate, watched television, and slept more soundly than I had in days. But the reprieve shattered the following afternoon. Rain had ceased, leaving glistening pavements. Stepping around a particularly large puddle near the curb, my downward glance caught my reflection in the murky water. And behind me, rendered with startling clarity, stood the shape. Its silhouette was now sharply defined, a dark figure possessing distinct shoulders and a featureless head. My body seized, my heart stuttered, breath grew shallow, trapped in my throat. I stumbled backward, nearly losing my footing. Concerned passers-by offered assistance, but I waved them off with incoherent mumbles, hurrying away, the grim understanding solidifying. Locking the mirror away had changed nothing. This presence wasn't contained. It was bound to me. That night, the whispers began. Subtle at first, easily mistaken for the building's ambient noises or the television's murmur. But they felt closer, intimate, like sibilant breaths near my ear. I'd spin around, finding only empty air. The sounds were low, raspy, uttering fragmented syllables that defied comprehension. Each occurrence sent ripples of gooseflesh across my arms. Despite the escalating terror, a perverse fascination lingered, an insistent pull towards the mirror itself. I craved opening it again, an illogical compulsion I battled daily. The pressure mounted, my thoughts circling obsessively back to the object hidden beneath my bed. Finally, late one night, resistance crumbled. Trembling hands retrieved the box, unlocked it, unwound the tape and towel. I forced myself to flip open the latch. My reflection swam into view, pale, sweat-sheened. Behind me, the shadow figure loomed, consuming nearly half the mirrored space. It was a stark human outline, utterly black, save for those two cold, dark voids where eyes should be. A profound shiver traced my spine. My gaze locked onto it, ensnared. My mouth went dry. The frantic beat of my heart echoed in my ears. Looking away felt impossible. Then, impossibly, the figure in the mirror moved. A shape resembling a hand extended forward, pressing against the inside of the glass. My stomach churned violently. With a strangled cry, I slammed the mirror shut, the impact cracking the fragile latch. I hurled it across the room. It clattered against the floorboards. Clutching my head, I gasped for breath, mind reeling, nausea rising in my throat. I left it lying there, a fallen omen on the floor. The ensuing hours were spent pacing, attempting to quell the rising tide of panic. Its presence felt undiminished, palpable in the apartment's shadowed corners. Every flicker of movement, every creak of an old building became suspect. Sleep offered no refuge. The next day demanded a semblance of routine. I cleaned, did laundry, steadfastly ignoring the mirror on the floor. Yet, every incidental reflection, a doorknob's gleam, the television's dark screen, held a fleeting glimpse of the shape, like an indelible afterimage burned onto my retinas. By late afternoon, the strain was unbearable. A drastic measure seemed the only recourse. Carrying the mirror, I descended into the building's basement. Near the storage lockers exists a small utility room, dark, damp, thick with the scent of mildew and decay. I placed the mirror on a dust-laden table. My intention was finality. Smash it. Obliterate it. But as I hefted a discarded hammer, that familiar, paralyzing pull arrested my arm. My breath hitched. Hesitation bloomed into stark fear. What unforeseen horrors might breaking it unleash? Would shattering the glass free this entity, or merely amplify its power? I stood frozen, hammer poised, breathing raggedly. The single bare bulb overhead flickered erratically. A wave of unnatural coldness brushed past my skin. The sensation spurred a tighter grip on the hammer. My eyes fixed on the mirror, lying open, reflecting my tense form. In the poor light, the figure was less distinct, yet its outline remained. My muscles tensed for the blow, but the shape within the glass seemed to shift. Expectant. The whispers returned, amplified in the confined space, slithering against my eardrums. My heart hammered violently. Sweat trickled into my eyes. Slowly, I lowered the hammer. Destruction felt impossible, perhaps even unwise. Instead, I snapped the mirror shut, laid it back on the table, rewrapped it in the towel, and resealed it with the remaining tape. I placed it back into the locked box. This time, I concealed the box deep within that subterranean room, hidden behind stacks of broken furniture and discarded junk. Perhaps distance, obscurity, would sever the connection, keep the shape confined. Returning to my apartment, tremors still racked my body. I sought solace in mundane tasks, like cleaning, a long shower, mindless television. But that night, settling into bed, a dense shadow flickered in the corner of my bedroom. It was instantaneous, like something momentarily blocking an unseen light source, then gone. My heart leaped. I lay rigid, staring into the darkness until my eyes burned, eventually succumbing to an uneasy, dream-haunted sleep. The days since have been a descent into frayed nerves. Footsteps seem to echo mine in the hallway. Reflections are unavoidable hazards. Windows, chrome taps, rain-slicked streets, the obsidian screen of my phone. Each offers potential glimpses of the shape, sometimes faint and fleeting, other times chillingly substantial. The sensation of being watched is constant. My chest remains tight, my mouth perpetually dry. Sudden surges of adrenaline leave my legs weak, fueling a frantic urge to flee with nowhere safe to run. I've taken to sleeping with the lights blazing. Music plays constantly, a futile attempt to drown out the whispers that still thread through the silence late at night. Insidious, meaningless sounds that raise goose flesh on my arms. Exhaustion is a constant state. A brief visit to Marcus's place offered no escape. I caught the figure's silhouette lurking behind me in his bathroom mirror and fled, inventing a flimsy excuse. So, here I remain, Silas, caught in this terrifying impasse. The shape endures, a persistent specter in glass and metal. The whispers persist, formless yet pregnant with intent. I feel it straining, wanting proximity, yearning to breach the barrier of the mirror. That certainty chills me whenever its dark outline manifests behind my own reflection. My spine tingles, my breath catches, my mind endlessly cycles, seeking an escape hatch from this waking nightmare, finding none. I haven't ventured back to the basement. The mirror waits in its locked box, entombed in dust and darkness. A part of me, desperate for resolution, screams to retrieve it, to confront this entity, to force an ending. Yet, a deeper, primal terror holds me back, convinced that opening it again will be the final catalyst, that the thing will fully emerge from the glass, stepping irrevocably into my world. My hands shake merely contemplating it. This is my reality now. Unable to destroy it, terrified to free it, I exist in a perpetual state of anxious vigilance. Every reflection is a source of dread. Every glance over my shoulder, a confirmation of the shadowy companion tethered to me, lingering just behind the surface, patient, waiting. And I am trapped, hoping its moment never arrives. My pack straps bit into my shoulders as I cinched them tight, squinting into the ceaseless wind that scoured the lip of the derelict village. A constant, sibilant rush. It moaned through skeletal walls and vacant doorways, a breath that never paused. Beneath my boots, stones grated. Dust devils danced around my ankle like phantom children. I'd come for the ruins, camera in hand, compelled to document the anatomy of this forgotten place, perched high on its windswept hill. They said the gales drove everyone away, that nothing endured here long. Yet some undeniable gravity had pulled me upward. Mounting a fractured stone step, I gained a ribbon of path snaking between husks of buildings. Desolation was absolute. The nearest structure clung to existence by a single corner. Its other walls surrendered to gravity. Splintered timbers, ghosts of roof beams, lay strewn across the earth, nudged and scraped by the wind's invisible hand. The sound was grating, dissonant, like furniture dragged protesting across a stone floor. I pressed onward, the shutters click a small, mechanical counterpoint to the wind's roar. On the camera's tiny screen, previews bloomed, rubble choked with shadow, under a vast, bruised sky where clouds raced like panicked thoughts. An unfamiliar tempo thrummed beneath my ribs, utterly alone, yet a peculiar tension constricted my chest, part exhilaration, part a creeping dread I couldn't name. I'd anticipated eeriness, yes, but not this sense of the wind itself as a sentient entity, breathing down the neck of the world. I paused before the collapsed maw of a well. Abruptly, the gale shifted, slamming into my back, my jacket cracking like a sail. The noise momentarily deafened me to my own gasps, and then Something else pierced the tumult. My name. Silas. A single word, seemingly uttered inches behind my shoulder. Adrenaline jolted through me. I pivoted, stumbling, nearly sacrificing my camera to the stones. Nothing. Only the wind, flinging grit against a jagged doorway nearby. My mouth turned to parchment. A trick of the air, I insisted silently, the wind playing ventriloquist with the ruins. Yet my legs felt watery, my palms slick. Gripping the camera tighter, I took one hesitant step back, raised the lens to the empty doorway, and captured the image. Splintered wood, a ragged silhouette of stone, nothing more. Taking a steadying breath, I ventured deeper into the village's heart. The path coiled past houses whose spines had broken, roofs imploded. Tattered scraps of fabric fluttered from the debris like desperate flags. I saw twisted metal, perhaps the remnants of a cookpot, consumed by rust. More photographs. Occasionally, the wind would momentarily soften, and in those lulls, my own footfalls sounded unnervingly loud. The insistent pulse still hammered in my ears. My gaze kept flicking over my shoulder, anticipating a figure stepping from behind a crumbling wall. "Calm yourself," I commanded. Abandoned. The hour-long drive up the winding track had shown no signs of life. Not a soul encountered on the road, let alone within these decaying confines. I emerged into what might have been a small central square. A low platform fashioned from heavy stone blocks suggested a former gathering place, perhaps for pronouncements or rituals. The wind eddied here, seizing a loose sheet of corrugated metal on a nearby roof fragment, rattling it with maddening persistence. Clang, 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 a sound that set my teeth on edge. I lifted the camera, framing the desolate plaza. Then, a flicker of movement at the periphery of my vision, to the right. A shadow detaching itself from the corner of a house, retracting the instant my head turned. My breath hitched, muscles coiled tight. I took a tentative step toward it, heart pounding, waiting for someone to emerge. Silence. Cautiously, I rounded the corner. Only a cairn of rubble and a battered wooden door leaning drunkenly against the wall met my eyes. No footprints disturbed the dust, no trace of passage. The wind surged anew, whipping a vortex of grit across the ground. I stood frozen, listening to the rasp of my own breathing, a knot tightening in my stomach. Gooseflesh prickled my arms beneath my jacket. Exhaling slowly, I moved on. I resolved to enter one of the more structurally sound houses. Though its roof gaped open to the sky, two walls still stood defiant. The door was long gone. I simply stepped across the threshold. Inside, chaos reigned. Shattered furniture littered the floor. A table lay capsized, chairs reduced to kindling. Ceramic shards crunched underfoot. Plates, some chipped, others pulverized. I tried to conjure the life that had unfolded here, the catastrophe that had ended it, but pushed the thoughts away. Focus on the tangible, the visible. Crouching, I photographed the debris, the camera's flash momentarily banishing the deep shadows, illuminating swirling dust motes with every shot. And then I froze. As the wind hammered the exterior wall, a sound threaded through the gale, coalescing into distinct syllables. Silas. Clearer this time. Not a muddled sigh of the wind, but an intimate whisper, impossibly close, brushing against my ear. My entire frame locked rigid. Blood rushed to my face, hot and frantic. My heartbeat became a physical blow against my ribs. I held my breath, straining to listen, eyes darting wildly around the ravaged room, seeking any source, any movement. The voice ceased. Instinct screamed, "Behind you!" I spun, aiming my flashlight beam toward the collapsed section of the roof. Emptiness. The wind pressed inward, groaning through weakened timbers. A tremor ran through me, my arms stiff, my legs suddenly unreliable. A desperate urge to flee, warred with an equally potent compulsion to understand, to find the origin of that spectral greeting. Slowly, I rose, sweeping the flashlight's beam across the stained walls. I navigated past the broken table, the crunch of glass under my boots making me wince. The thought of calling out flickered, but my throat felt constricted, the impulse dying unspoken. Suddenly, a loud thud erupted from the corner to my left. I jumped violently, the flashlight nearly slipping from my grasp. A chunk of ceiling plaster had detached, crashing onto a dilapidated cupboard below. Dust billowed, acrid and thick. I coughed, eyes watering, and scrambled back toward the doorway, stumbling over the threshold into the open air. The wind struck my face like a physical blow, gritty and cold. I tasted dust on my tongue. Back in the relative openness of the path, I fought to regain composure, leaning against a cracked wall, forcing slow, deep breaths. My pulse, however, refused to slow, a frantic drumbeat in my ears. I decided to press on toward the next cluster of houses. Perhaps a compelling photograph waited there, something to distract from this pervasive unease. Moving between two leaning structures, the passage narrowing, I perceived new shadows coalescing at the far end. I raised my flashlight, its beam swallowed by distance, revealing only more rubble, time-worn bricks. For a moment, I pressed my back against the cold, rough stone of the wall, feeling its solidity against my jacket. My heart hammered. That unsettling conviction returned. I was being watched. No shape, no figure, just the prickling certainty at the base of my skull. The wind intensified further, its voice rising to a howl. Loose debris skittered and clattered across the uneven ground, and woven into the gale's fabric, faint sounds like human voices began to emerge. I turned my head, trying to locate a source, but they seemed omnipresent, carried on every gust. Fragments of words, indistinct murmurings like snippets of half-heard conversations, and something else, a low, rhythmic sound, like chanting, or perhaps soft, sorrowful singing. A leaden weight settled in my gut. It had to be the wind, I muttered, its passage through the ruins creating bizarre acoustics, phantom echoes. Rounding another collapsed structure, I found a larger house, surprisingly retaining a significant portion of its roof. Its door hung precariously from a single, twisted hinge. I pushed through into the gloom. The air inside hung thick with the scent of damp decay and stale earth. My flashlight carved a path through the darkness, revealing a narrow hallway. Faded paint peeled from the walls like sunburned skin. The floor beneath was cracked and uneven. To the left, a large room opened up, likely a former living space. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, its chimney truncated, open to the elements. I aimed the camera, fired the flash. The brief, stark illumination threw unsettling shapes into relief all around me. Illusions I forced myself to ignore. I needed a record, factual documentation. Advancing toward the far wall, my beam fell upon fallen shelves, disgorging sodden books onto the floor, their pages fused into waterlogged blocks. I leaned closer, capturing the image. Then, a faint laugh, thin and dry, drifted down from directly above. My scalp prickled. I snapped my head up. A gaping hole in the ceiling offered a view of what remained of an upper room. I swept the flashlight beam across it, half expecting to see an animal, some mundane explanation. Only rotting timbers and the skeletal remains of a bed frame met my gaze. The laughter evaporated, absorbed back into the wind's moan. I swallowed hard against a rising tightness in my throat, the pulse in my temples now a painful throb. Retreating to the hallway, I directed my light into another room. A kitchen, perhaps. Rusted pots and pans lay scattered across the floor. A few still clung precariously to wall hooks, swaying gently in the drafts that snaked through the house. The wind howled outside, its pitch shifting, modulating, and then I heard it, a sound like a whispered prayer, soft yet insistent, composed of multiple voices layered one upon another, too faint to decipher individual words. My stomach clenched. "Just the wind," I whispered aloud, the sound of my own voice thin and shaky in the oppressive silence between gusts. Edging forward, a dark shape flickered at the edge of my vision. I spun, flashlight beams stabbing along the walls. Nothing. My breathing grew shallow and rapid. Tension knotted my shoulders into aching cords. I compelled myself onward, pushing open a door at the rear of the kitchen. It revealed a smaller room, floored with warped wood. My light picked out an overturned cabinet, a heap of mildewed linens. The window panes were shattered voids, allowing the wind to race through unimpeded, tugging at my clothes, rearranging the thick dust on the floor. And there, preserved in the dust, the faint outlines of footprints. Old, perhaps, but undeniably present. I raised the camera, my hands trembling so badly I struggled to hold it steady. Another photo. I needed air, needed the open sky. I found a side door and exited the suffocating confines of the house. Outside, the light had begun to fail. The clouds overhead had thickened into an unbroken ceiling of bruised gray. The wind remained a relentless assault. A choice loomed. Continue exploring. Push deeper into the village's secrets, or retreat while some daylight lingered. Part of me screamed to leave, to get back to the car, back to the known world. Yet an opposing force, a strange, insistent pressure, urged me to stay. It felt as if the village itself held its breath, waiting, wanting me to witness more. The echoes persisted, woven into the wind's lament. Phantom conversations, disembodied laughter, fragments of chant caught between the decaying walls. I turned down another alley, narrower this time, the backs of houses pressing close on either side. Broken roof tiles crunched underfoot, their sharp squeaks grating on my already frayed nerves. More photos. The camera beeped softly, memory running low. I'd curate later. Around a sharp bend, the alley opened into a small courtyard dominated by a derelict fountain. Its stone was chipped and stained, the basin bone dry, webbed with cracks. The ghostly outlines of benches lined the perimeter. One lay in pieces, another gaped, seatless. I raised the camera to document this quiet tableau of decay. A sharp, metallic rattle sounded behind me. I whirled, scanning the rooftops. A loose piece of metal gutter swung precariously from the eaves of an adjacent building, striking the stone wall with rhythmic insistence. Clang, clang. Yet the tension in my body refused to ease. My pulse remained a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Then abruptly, the wind died. A pocket of profound silence descended, unnervingly absolute. In it, my own ragged breathing sounded impossibly loud. And then, with chilling clarity that raised the hair on my arms and neck, the voices returned. Not whispers this time, but a low, resonant murmur. A litany of words in a language I couldn't comprehend. Ancient prayers, perhaps, or incantations dredged from the village's deep past. A cold dread solidified in my stomach. My eyes darted around the empty courtyard, searching, expecting. No one. Nothing. I pressed a hand flat against my chest, feeling the frantic burn in my heart. Leave now, my rational mind urged. I took a step, two, toward the alley entrance, then stopped, rooted at the spot. Something. Curiosity, stubbornness, perhaps something else entirely, insisted I needed more. More proof, more images. I wiped sweat from my brow. The wind, though momentarily paused, had left a deep chill, yet my skin felt hot, flushed with adrenaline and fear. I walked toward the fountain, stepping carefully around fallen masonry. As if on cue, the wind returned, gusting violently, kicking up dust and debris in a blinding swirl. My eyes stung. I blinked rapidly against the grit. Raising the camera, I snapped a picture of the fountain. The flash flared, momentarily bleaching the scene. And in that split second of stark illumination, I saw it. A figure, standing near one of the broken benches. Indistinct, fleeting, but undeniably human-shaped. A sharp gasp escaped me. I fumbled, aiming the flashlight beam toward the spot. The bench stood vacant, stark against the crumbling wall. My heart hammered against my throat, a painful, suffocating rhythm. I stood panting, staring at the empty space, the wind tearing at my jacket. Imagination, my mind insisted desperately. A trick of light and shadow and fear. Enough. The pressure in my chest felt unbearable, threatening to crack me open. I turned, abandoning the courtyard, and began walking quickly back toward the main path, the route out of this haunted place. Not running, but moving with determined speed, my footsteps echoing unnervingly on the cracked flagstones. Whenever the wind momentarily dipped, I heard them again, distant murmurs, trailing me, whispering just beyond the threshold of hearing. I kept my eyes fixed forward, pausing only once to check the camera's memory. Nearly full. Finally, I reached the village edge, pausing by the crumbling stone step where my exploration had begun. I turned, surveying the broken silhouette of the settlement against the darkening sky. The wind still sang its mournful, eerie song through the ruins, a chorus of sighs and whispers, echoes of lives long extinguished. My hands felt damp and cold as they gripped the camera. My shoulders throbbed with accumulated tension. My mouth was desert dry. Swallowing tasted of dust. I raised the camera one last time, framing the entire desolate scene, and as the shutter clicked, I heard it again. Silas. Softly spoken, carried on the wind, yet perfectly clear. Every hair on my body stood erect. A response formed on my lips, a question, a challenge, but my throat seized, refusing to give it voice. My eyes burned raw from the wind, the dust, the strain. I turned my back on the village and started down the rocky incline. The wind pursued me, tugging at my clothes like impatient hands. As I neared the base of the hill, its intensity lessened slightly, its voice softening. I risked one final glance over my shoulder. The village sat hunched and silent, a dark wound on the bruised flesh of the twilight sky. A profound chill radiated outward from my chest. I drew a breath, the stale, gritty air still clinging to my lips. Clutching the camera protectively against my side, the recent moments replayed. Shadows that evaporated under scrutiny, voices woven into the wind, laughter echoing from empty rooms, the unnerving, constant sense of an unseen presence that had kept my heart racing. Answers eluded me, but the images were captured, stored. My name, whispered on the wind, still resonated in my ears. Reaching my car felt like surfacing from a deep dive. My body ached with fatigue, my thoughts fragmented and scattered. The strange greetings, the fleeting shapes, the prayers seemingly etched into the very air. It all churned within me. Relief washed over me as I slid behind the wheel. The sky bled from gray to near black. As if in farewell, the wind let out one final, prolonged howl around the vehicle. I turned the key, the engine catching reassuringly. Yet even within the car's metal shell, the feeling of something left unfinished, something unresolved, lingered. I drove away, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror, watching the ruined village recede, swallowed by distance and gathering darkness. The wind still whistled past my windows, and my mind obsessively replayed the moments I'd heard my name called out of the emptiness. I knew I would recount this, though explanation failed me. I could only offer the testimony of my senses. As I navigated the twisting road back towards the highway, I noticed my hands were still shaking on the steering wheel. My heartbeat maintained its frantic pace long after the village was out of sight. Only when I finally merged onto the smooth, familiar asphalt of the main road did I realize I was gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. What that place was, what message it held, I couldn't say. I only know I heard those voices, glimpsed those shadows, felt profoundly, chillingly observed. No living soul revealed itself, yet I felt encompassed by something. Something that perhaps desired its story told. So, this is it. That village on the hill isn't empty, regardless of its desolate appearance. The wind is its memory, carrying the indelible echoes of those who walked its paths, lived within its walls. And for a few unsettling hours, I felt them reach across the years, across the silence. I didn't linger for answers. One day was more than enough, but the presence remains, a cold spot in my memory, reignited every time I look at the photographs captured in that lonely, windswept ruin. The engine coughed, a terminal rattle in the metallic throat of my tired sedan, and then silence descended, absolute and profound on that ribbon of asphalt cutting through nowhere. Trouble, I knew instantly. Yet the deeper peril, the one that truly chills the marrow, wasn't the stranding itself. It was the nature of salvation when it arrives in the wrong guise. My name is Alara, forged in a crucible of self-sufficiency, or so I'd always believed. When my faithful, if weary machine began its death throes mid-journey across the vast American expanse, dismissing it seemed the independent thing to do. Surely, the next town, a mechanic, couldn't be an insurmountable distance. Profoundly mistaken. Oklahoma's heartland swallowed my car whole as dusk bled into that spectral hour. Neither day nor proper night where the familiar world dissolves. An endless tarmac stretched fore and aft, flanked by vacant fields punctuated only by the skeletal remains of forgotten homesteads. I lifted the hood, gazing into the engine's baffling metal heart, absurdly hoping for revelation. Truth be told, a spark plug was as alien to me as a distant nebula. As the light abandoned the sky entirely, and a chill snaked into the air, the abstract worry began crystallizing into something sharp, something visceral. It might actually depend on it. My phone, predictably, remained a dead slab of glass and plastic. No bars. Again. Just as the desperate calculus of walking, direction unknown, began to form, twin beams pierced the receding twilight. A surge, potent and warm. Relief. I flagged it down, arms windmills of frantic hope, shedding dignity like unnecessary weight. The approaching vehicle materialized into a hulking pickup, pulling onto the shoulder some distance behind me, its headlights carving the scene into stark relief. A man emerged, unfolding himself from the cab, tall, wide across the shoulders, clad in worn flannel, a baseball cap shadowing his features. Bit of bother. His voice drifted over, amiable on the surface. A nod was all I managed, a sudden, inexplicable tremor starting deep inside. Yes, it just stopped. Are you handy with engines by chance? He offered a low chuckle, closing the distance between us. Might know a thing or two. A faint, stale aroma preceded him. Alcohol. Permission to have a look. I stepped aside, gesturing mutely at the exposed machinery. He leaned in, and now, closer, I saw the faint web of red in the whites of his eyes. A moment passed under the hood. Well, he straightened, rubbing grease onto his jeans. Looks like your alternator gave up the ghost. You won't be rolling anywhere tonight, I reckon. My stomach plummeted. Oh, heavens. Is there a town? Somewhere I could get a tow? He jerked a thumb back the way he'd come. Nearest civilization's a good 40 miles. But listen, pretty thing, no need to fret. He smiled then, a fraction too broad, his gaze lingering a beat too long. Happy to give you a lift. There it was again, that internal alarm, insistent and cold. That's incredibly generous, I began, playing for time, for thought, but I couldn't possibly impose. Perhaps I could just try calling for service again. Not a whisper of signal out this way, he countered smoothly, taking another small step towards me. The space felt suddenly charged, shrinking. Come now, no need to be skittish. I don't bite. His grin returned, catching the harsh headlight glare, transforming into something predatory. An involuntary retreat, a single step back. I truly appreciate it, but I should probably wait. See if another car comes along. My boyfriend, he's expecting me. He'll start to worry if I'm terribly late. The lie felt thin, brittle. His expression flickered, a microsecond of something hard, disappointment, or perhaps raw anger, before smoothing over again. Boyfriend, is it? The lightness in his tone felt forced now, underscored by a current that raised the fine hairs on my arms. Can't keep him waiting, then. Still, you sure I can't convince you? Old Silas here wouldn't mind the company. Gets mighty cold out. A tight, forced smile. My voice, I prayed, sounded steadier than I felt. I'm quite sure, thank you. I'll manage. He didn't move immediately, just held my gaze. A long, appraising moment where the air crackled, where the role of predator and prey felt terrifyingly defined. Finally, a shrug, deceptively casual. Have it your way. But hang on, let me see if I've got a tool or something that might just help you out. Before coherent protest could form, he pivoted, ambling back towards his truck. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched him open the passenger door, leaning inside. The dome light flickered on, illuminating the cab's interior, and I saw them. Coils of rope, a roll of wide silver duct tape, the unmistakable glint of a large knife blade. Ice flooded my veins. A sickening certainty settled. Entering that truck meant vanishing from the world. Silas straightened, turning back, something now clutched in his hand. I didn't pause to identify it. I fled. His shout erupted behind me, the veneer of friendliness shattered, replaced by pure, guttural rage. Heavy boots pounded the asphalt, chasing the frantic slap of my own sneakers. Faster, faster than I knew possible. Lungs searing, legs screaming, but running towards what? Only emptiness lay ahead, swallowed by the immense dark. I swerved off the road, plunging into the rough embrace of a fallow field, hoping the uneven ground might hinder him. I heard him crashing through the brittle stalks behind me, the sound terrifyingly close. Just as my muscles threatened to seize entirely, a shape loomed against the star-dusted campus of night, the gaunt silhouette of an old barn, my only sanctuary. A final, desperate surge of adrenaline propelled me forward. I reached the heavy wooden door, wrenched it open, and tumbled inside, slamming it shut behind me. My fingers scrabbled uselessly for a lock, a bar, any kind of security. Nothing. The ancient wood hung loose and ill-fitting in its frame. Retreating deeper into the cavernous space, eyes darting wildly, seeking concealment amidst shadowed farm implements and collapsing mounds of musty hay. The door exploded inward. Silas stood framed in the opening, a dark monolith against the night. His cap was gone, revealing tangled hair, his face contorted. In his hand, the knife gleamed, wickedly curved. Now, he rasped, breath tearing from his lungs, eyes alight with a terrifying mix of fury and anticipation. Why do you have to make it difficult? We could have had ourselves a real nice time. My hand closed around the nearest object, the long handle of a rusted pitchfork. I hefted it, the tines aimed unsteadily towards him. Stay back. The words trembled, betraying the bravado. I swear I'll use this. A chilling laugh bounced off the rafters. Spirited. I like that. Makes the chase sweeter. He lunged, startlingly fast for his bulk. Instinct took over. I swung the pitchfork wildly. Against all odds, it connected. A howl tore from him as a tine raked across his cheek, leaving a dark, wet furrow. No time for assessment. I scrambled past him, bursting back into the open night. But where now? The car was a tomb, the landscape a void. Then, a flicker of memory, some half-recalled advice from a television crime drama. If pursued, run for the light. run towards signs of life. My gaze swept the horizon, desperate. There, far off, a minuscule, trembling luminescence. A house, a station. It didn't matter. It was hope. I ran towards it, a blind automaton driven by terror, ignoring the fire in my chest, the agony in my limbs. Behind me, the sounds of pursuit continued, crashing vegetation, frustrated curses ripping through the night air. The light grew, resolving into the definite shape of a dwelling, a porch lamp casting a welcoming golden pool, a car parked reassuringly in the drive. Summoning the very last dregs of my strength, I aimed for that beacon, my voice tearing free in raw screams. Help! Oh God, please, somebody help me. The porch light brightened, the front door creaked open. An elderly couple emerged, their initial confusion morphing into stark alarm as they took in the scene. Me, ragged and sprinting, pursued by the menacing shape of Silas closing the distance. "Call the police," I sobbed, collapsing onto their porch. "Please, he's trying to kill me." Without a word, the old man pulled me inside, the door slamming shut, the deadbolt clicking home with reassuring finality. His wife was already speaking urgently into a telephone receiver. Through the window, we watched Silas halt at the edge of their lawn. He stood motionless for a dreadful moment, his gaze fixed on the house, radiating palpable fury. Then, as the first faint, distant wail of sirens began to thread the night, he turned abruptly and melted back towards the road. Minutes later, flashing blue and red lights painted the scene, but Silas and his formidable truck had vanished. The officers took my trembling statement, broadcasted an alert, but the vastness of the night felt like an accomplice, shielding him. Curled on the couple's floral sofa, swaddled in a quilt, sipping hot tea that did little to quell the tremors in my hands, the enormity of the almost crashed down. Had I accepted his offer? Had I not glimpsed those terrible tools? Had the barn not appeared? Or this small house with its brave, kind occupants? 6 months have drifted by since that night swallowed me and spat me back out. Silas remains a phantom, though whispers of similar encounters have surfaced in other states, other lonely stretches of road. Nightmares still visit, sometimes vivid, sometimes just formless dread. I find myself scanning shadows, jumping at sudden noises. Yet, alongside of fear, a fierce appreciation for the simple act of breathing has taken root. Each sunrise feels borrowed, a bonus round I knew I didn't qualify for. Caution is my new companion, yes, but so is a heightened awareness of genuine human decency, the quiet kindness that asks nothing in return, unlike the counterfeit warmth of a predator. So, should you ever find yourself broken down on a desolate road as darkness gathers, listen intently to that small, primal voice within. If unease whispers, heed it. Solitude is infinitely preferable to the wrong company. And remember this, the true saviors aren't always those offering a ride out of the darkness, but sometimes they are the ones who simply unlock their door to let a desperate stranger in. Stay vigilant. The world holds shadows, but it also holds light. The crucial skill is learning to discern one from the other. The humid weight of the afternoon pressed down as Elias stepped onto the grounds of the Willow Creek Holdings. buildings, a clipboard clutched in one hand, architectural blueprints rolled tightly in the other. His shirt adhered to his spine like a second skin, the taste of grit from the long gravel approach coating his palate. His vision was clear, resolute. Transmute these decaying barns and outbuildings into a vibrant nexus for culture. He envisioned studios humming with creation, stages awaiting performance, enclaves for artistic communion. His mind grappled with the tangible, load-bearing walls, roof integrity, the intricate veins of wiring. Folklore held no currency for him, nor did tales of the uncanny, yet an undeniable dissonance hummed the air from the moment his boots touched the soil. He traversed the main yard, the sun beating relentlessly. From the shadowed immensity of the largest barn, faint skitterings whispered. An animal, he reasoned initially. But then he registered the peculiar nature of his own footfalls. They didn't merely echo. Something else seemed to pace him, stride for stride, just beyond the weathered planks of the barn wall. A sharp jolt tightened his chest, his pulse accelerating into a frantic rhythm. He drew a quick, shallow breath, attributing the phenomenon to the warped acoustics of an empty, cavernous structure. Pushing inward, navigating loose floorboards with caution, the scent of ancient hay and pervasive dampness filled his nostrils. He scanned the dim interior, eyes straining against the gloom. Nothing. No raccoon, no barn owl, not a trace. A flicker of self-reproach, letting his imagination bolt like a spooked horse. This was meant to be demolition and rebirth, purely physical. Shrugging off the prickle of unease, he returned to his assessment. The ensuing days dissolved into a routine of reclamation. Elias wrestled with accumulated detritus, drifts of corroded tools, constellations of rusted nails, fractured furniture skeletons, stiffened leather harnesses coiled in corners. Grime coated his gloves, dust motes stinging his eyes. He hauled load after load in a small trailer, depositing the ranch's discarded history at a designated refuse site. Throughout these exertions, the land maintained a heavy silence, punctuated only by the sighing of wind through dry grass. Yet, he found himself pausing intermittently, convinced he'd detected phantom footsteps trailing him, or the faintest thread of conversation drifting from an unseen source. A swift turn, a rapid scan of the empty yard, always revealing nothing but stillness. It was on the 6th day, perched high on a ladder patching vulnerabilities in the main barn's roof, that the silence broke. Hammer, nails, and raw timber balanced precariously around him, the zenith sun drawing sweat down his brow. As he drove a nail home, a voice reached him, distant, soft, like intimate murmuring carried on the breeze. He froze, heart slamming against his ribs. The hammer slipped, clattering down the rungs, nearly upsetting his balance. He gripped the ladder, forcing himself steady, head swiveling to survey the property. Isolation reigned. His truck stood sentinel by the fence line. Beyond it, only empty fields stretched toward the horizon. A constriction seized his throat. Dehydration. Heat stroke playing tricks on his senses. He swallowed hard, marshaled his resolve, and grimly finished the repair. That evening, armed with a heavy-duty flashlight, Elias resolved to explore the periphery, to gauge the condition of the smaller outbuildings. The sensation of being observed clung to him like the day's humidity. His steps felt leaden on the gravel path. The night air hung motionless, yet a low rustling agitated the weeds nearby. His flashlight beam snagged on scattered debris, shards of glass glinting like malevolent eyes, rusted hinges, coils of frayed rope. He kicked aside a loose plank, and a sudden movement registered just behind him. He spun, heart hammering, the cone of light trembling violently. Empty yard. Then, near one of the sheds, a shape coalesced and dissolved in the same instant. Tall, hunched, seemingly adorned with antlers or horns. It moved with startling swiftness, vanishing behind the shed's blind wall. Breath hitched in his throat. His palms grew slick. Tentatively, he advanced, painting the spot with light. "Hey," he called out, his voice thin, swallowed by the expanse. "Who's there?" Only his own strained breathing answered. He compelled himself forward, rounding the corner of the shed. Piles of old bricks and a stack of rotting lumber occupied the space. No footprints marred the packed earth, no sign of concealment. He listened intently. The profound quiet returned. A wave of relief washed over him, quickly chased by a residue of deep unease. A trick of the light, he rationalized. A shadow puppeteered by his own unsteady beam. Yet the figure's perceived solidity, its purposeful motion, lingered disturbingly in his mind. Dawn found Elias stiff and unrested, the cot in the property's Spartan farmhouse offering little comfort. He fortified himself with coffee before stepping out to inspect the barns under the clearer light of morning. Dew silvered the ground, his boots leaving sharp impressions in the damp soil. He circled the shed from the previous night, searching for any anomaly daylight might reveal. Near where the figure had vanished, he found a disturbed patch of earth, the impression frustratingly blurred, yet hinting at something cloven, something not entirely animalistic. Crouching, he sifted the cool soil through his fingers. The unnerving certainty of unseen eyes fixed upon his back prickled his neck, but a turn revealed only the vacant expanse. Despite the gnawing anxiety, the project demanded progress. The afternoon was spent measuring interior walls in the second barn, destined to become a gallery. As his tape measure spanned the length of one wall, a distinct scraping sound emanated from the opposite side, like claws or something jagged, dragged deliberately across wood. The heavy thud of his heart resonated in his ears. Wiping sweat from his upper lip, he forced himself to investigate, moving with deliberate slowness, ears straining. Floorboards groaned under his weight. Muted light filtered through a single grimy window, painting the interior in shades of gray. In a far corner, stark against the aged timber, were fresh gouges. They were roughly chest-high, scored in sharp diagonal lines. His breath caught. Tentatively, he touched the raw grooves. They were deep, splintering the wood. A tingling sensation crawled across his scalp. This wasn't random damage. It felt intentional. He retreated to his truck, phone in hand, the impulse to summon help warring with a stubborn pride. He dealt with structural failures, faulty wiring, the predictable problems of renovation. Lurking shapes and cryptic markings were outside his expertise. Yet, the fear of sounding irrational, paranoid, stayed his hand. He put the phone away. Instead, he drove into the nearest town and returned before dusk, armed with several motion sensor cameras and batteries. He strategically positioned them around the barns and near the sheds, testing their range and low-light capabilities. With the buildings secured for the night, he retreated to the farmhouse, seeking a semblance of peace that refused to settle. Sleep was a fractured affair, punctuated by indistinct thuds from outside, followed by profound silence. Around midnight, a flicker of light beneath the farmhouse door, likely a camera trigger, sent his pulse racing. He considered arming himself with a tire iron or heavy wrench, but remained frozen, forcing slow, deliberate breaths. After an hour suspended in tense wakefulness, oblivion finally claimed him. Morning light brought an immediate compulsion to check the cameras. The memory cards confirmed several activations clustered around midnight. The resulting footage, however, yielded mostly frustrating blurs, streaks of motion too swift for focus. One camera captured a density, a shadow, crossing the barn door, but darkness obscured any detail. It appeared large, passing the lens in less than a second. A cold fist of fear clenched in his gut. He had confirmation. Something was undeniably present, but its nature remained terrifyingly obscure. The renovation continued. Elias wrestled new boards into place, tore away rusted corrugated metal, even shored up the farmhouse porch. Throughout the daylight hours, the subtle acoustics persisted, phantom whispers that seemed to emanate sometimes from just behind him, sometimes from the dusty obscurity of the rafters. He climbed up, inspecting the high beams, finding only desiccated bird nests and elaborate tapestries of cobwebs. Occasionally, his hands would tremble mid-task upon hearing those elusive sounds. His breath would catch, his fists would clench reflexively. Focus on the work, he commanded himself, driving nails, sawing timber, attempting to wall off the encroaching strangeness. One sweltering afternoon, hauling debris from the farthest barn, he stepped outside into a sudden, inexplicable pocket of cold air. The contrast against the day's heat was jarring. Simultaneously, the wind surged, slamming the heavy barn door shut behind him with violent finality. He spun, grabbing the handle, pulling. It resisted, feeling impossibly heavy, as if braced from within. Panic surged. He yanked with all his strength, and the door flew open. The interior was unchanged, dusty beams, scattered remnants, profound emptiness. His hands shook as he backed away. Then from above, a low growl, guttural and menacing. His head snapped up. A dense knot of shadow hunched amidst the high beams, formless yet undeniably present, absorbing the dim light. A current of pure ice traced his spine. Stumbling backward, he nearly tripped over stacked lumber. He fumbled for his flashlight, aiming its beam upward, but it illuminated only a swirling galaxy of dust motes. When his eyes adjusted again, the shape was gone. He bolted outside, breath tearing raggedly from his lungs, hands braced on his knees as he fought for composure. Was his mind fracturing under the strain? Could a large animal have taken refuge in the rafters? The structures felt too frail for a bear, yet the size and the persistent image of horns, of antlers. He forced himself to walk the perimeter again, scanning the distant tree line. Grass whispered, gravel crunched. A dull ache of sustained tension settled in his lower back. No movement, only the passive fields and skeletal trees. That night became a vigil. Elias sat in the farmhouse living room, flashlight resting heavy in his lap, windows open to the nocturnal sounds. Around 1:15 a.m., a solid thump resonated from the porch. His chest constricted. Swallowing hard, he rose, flashlight beam cutting the darkness. Heart pounding like a drum against his ribs, he peered through the window. The porch light cast a weak, jaundiced glow, revealing a tall silhouette standing near the steps. Its shape was broad, substantial, and atop its head, something protruded, the unmistakable suggestion of horns. His scalp tightened. He gripped the doorknob, a cold dread preventing him from turning it immediately. He stared, eyes straining to resolve the form in the inadequate light. After several tense seconds, the shape moved deliberately off the porch, melting into the deeper shadows of the yard. Where it went, he couldn't discern. Compelled by a desperate need for evidence, he forced himself outside, flashlight held like a weapon. The porch boards groaned under his weight. He swept the light across the wooden surface, then down the steps. There, pressed into the damp earth, were distinct cloven impressions. Not deer tracks, not precisely. They were oddly spaced, disturbingly upright in their gait. He crouched, the beam trembling slightly as it traced the strange prints. His hands shook. The night enveloped him in silence, broken only by his own rapid breaths. He tried to follow the trail, but it vanished into the grass after a few yards. A hollow sensation opened in his chest. He remained outside for several minutes, scanning the impenetrable darkness, but saw nothing more. The following day, Elias called Mateo, a friend in general contracting. He requested Mateo bring a couple of his crew out, framing it as needing to accelerate the renovation, citing schedule pressures. He omitted any mention of silhouettes or unnerving tracks, unwilling to voice the inexplicable. They arrived the next morning, their robust truck laden with tools and lumber. The presence of others, the mundane sounds of work, felt like a temporary shield. They spent the day tearing out compromised beams, clearing debris, installing fresh supports. Elias remained hyper-alert, listening for any deviation from the norm, but the unsettling quietude held. Perhaps the increased activity acted as a deterrent. At one point, hauling trash toward the dumpster, a flicker of movement at the tree line snagged his attention. He paused, the heavy bag leaning against his leg. A dark shape stepped behind a thick trunk and was gone. His heart leaped, but he forced himself back to the task, back to the relative normalcy of the worksite. The others reported nothing unusual. He kept his sight to himself. As evening descended and Mateo's truck rumbled away, the familiar tension coiled tight in his stomach. The shield was gone. He was alone again. That night, one final time, he reviewed the camera footage on his laptop at the farmhouse's small table. The daytime recordings showed nothing beyond the ordinary bustle, but captured near sunset, moving through the tall blades of grass near the primary barn, was a bulky form. The outline around its head was jagged, complex. The fine hairs on his arms prickled. He advanced the footage frame by frame. The shape traversed the camera's view in perhaps 3 seconds, indistinct, yet undeniably the source of his dread. His mouth felt dry. His heart beat a heavy, erratic rhythm. He resolved to stay only 1 more week, enough to complete the essential structural repairs he'd intended to handle personally. After that, a permanent crew could take over. Each day became a race against his own fraying nerves. He worked with fierce concentration, replacing siding, reinforcing floors, prepping walls for insulation, trying to occupy every corner of his mind with the physical task at hand. The nights remained disturbed by distant clatter, faint scratching sounds he actively avoided investigating. A perpetual ache resided between his shoulder blades. Sleep offered little respite. On his final day, Elias completed his last planned tasks. He walked through each barn, inspecting the new timbers, making meticulous notes for the incoming team. Standing in the vast main barn, surveying the reinforced beams, a low grunt sounded directly behind him. He whirled, heart seizing. Framed in the wide doorway stood the presence. Broad, tall, undeniably crowned with the dark curve of horns. It held its ground just long enough for the image to burn itself into his retinas, then darted away with that unnatural speed. His hands began to shake uncontrollably. Breath stalled in his throat. A profound tremor ran through him. Backing away, he collided with a support post, nearly dropping his clipboard. He scrambled outside into the stark relief of daylight, eyes sweeping the perimeter. Nothing stirred but the indifferent grass swaying in the breeze. He locked everything meticulously, climbed into his truck, and sat for a long minute, dragging air into his tight chest, sweat beading on his neck. Finally, he turned the key, the engine roaring to life. As he drove down the gravel road, the barns receded in his rearview mirror, quiet, seemingly benign under the bright sun. But he knew. He knew something resided there, something impervious to blueprints and structural repairs. The knot of fear in his chest didn't begin to loosen until Willow Creek Holdings was miles behind him. What haunted that land, Elias couldn't say. He left the digital ghosts on the camera footage for the new crew, along with a terse warning to remain vigilant. No final reports have reached him, but the memory remains potent. The feeling of being perpetually watched, the phantom cadence of footsteps in dusty corridors, the indelible silhouette of horns slipping into shadow. If his path ever leads back to Willow Creek, he'll bring more than a flashlight. Until then, the land can keep its secrets, buried deep beneath the dust and decay. Whispers of the structure reached me via my supervisor, Elias, a few weeks prior, an assignment to assess its potential for upcoming art installations. My interest remained stubbornly dormant, buried beneath other projects, until a pair of photographs landed in my inbox. Something within the dilapidated stillness of the place snagged my attention. It exuded an aura of profound age and abandonment, as though decades had passed since the last human tread its floors. The accompanying message hinted at its former life as a gallery, suggesting remnants of artwork might still linger within. Curiosity piqued, I consented to a site visit, ostensibly to gauge its suitability for contemporary works. No premonition of the uncanny troubled me. My objective was simple: evaluate, report, return home. Yet within those walls, I unearthed an inexplicable phenomenon. My initial arrival confronted me with a facade where paint peeled back in intricate, decaying patterns. Window panes wore a cataract of grime. The main entrance yielded with a protesting shriek of rusted hinges, admitting me into a hallway saturated with the scent of aged timber and pervasive mold. Faint illumination filtered through sparse, high windows, casting the interior in shades of desolate gray, just enough light to navigate the gloom. Beneath my cautious steps, the floorboards emitted slow, resonant groans. I traversed several chambers, their walls starkly naked, save for fractured chairs, slumped in corners, and drifts of scattered paper across the floor. Stooping, I examined these pages. Most were utterly blank. Others bore graphite whispers too faded to decipher. The building possessed a hollow resonance, a sense of secrets held tightly within its decaying heart. Eventually, my path converged on a long corridor, terminating at a closed door. The knob, stiff with disuse, turned under protest, but wasn't locked. Beyond lay a compact gallery space. Frames, shrouded in dust-laden cloths, leaned against the walls like patient specters. I drew aside one covering. Beneath lay a landscape painting, its pigments faded, its surface marred by scratches. Towering mountains and skeletal trees dominated the scene, clearly neglected for an age. No artist's signature offered a clue. Methodically, I unveil the others. Most were unremarkable or damaged beyond interpretation. Then, sequestered in a corner beneath a heavy, dark drape, I perceived a larger frame. An unexpected acceleration quickened my pulse. Sheer, irrational curiosity, perhaps. I pulled the sheet away. It revealed a portrait, a man of substantial shoulders and erect posture, his hat angled low, but his face was a void. A smooth, featureless expanse occupied the space where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. This wasn't damage, not erasure. It felt like a deliberate, chilling omission by the artist. I stood transfixed. The colors surrounding the man's silhouette pulsed with an odd intensity. While the brushwork defining his form seemed precise, the head remained unnervingly blank. A knot of apprehension coiled in my gut. I scanned the frame, the nearby wall, searching for attribution, a name, a date, but found nothing. In a dilapidated cabinet nearby, I slid open a small drawer, hoping for archival records. Dust motes danced in the weak light, revealing only desiccated insect husks. I made notes on my phone, focusing on the painting's dimensions and condition, attempting professionalism. That evening, the image clung to my thoughts. A figure lacking features wasn't inherently bizarre in abstract art, but this piece was stubbornly representational. The clothing, the posture, rendered with meticulous realism. Only the face, the locus of identity, was absent. Later, seeking sleep, I lay in darkness, eyes closed, assuring myself it was merely an unsettling artwork, my reaction overwrought. But slumber brought a visitor, the same figure. He materialized in some lightless void, his featureless head angled towards me, an unseen gaze piercing the dark. I awoke slick with sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs. The digital glow of my phone read 3:00 a.m. Rising, I drank water, forcing measured breaths until the panic subsided, eventually succumbing again to uneasy sleep. The following day, compelled, I sought information on the defunct gallery. Contacting the local historical society yielded scanned documents, exhibition lists, artist rosters, landscapes, sculptures, portraits of civic figures were mentioned, but no faceless man. Online searches proved equally fruitless. Keywords like faceless portrait, anonymous gallery art, historical local paintings, leading down digital blind alleys. Resigned, I decided another visit was necessary to complete my assessment. My second excursion occurred mid-afternoon, beneath a sky thick with cloud, muting the daylight. I navigated directly to the small gallery, treading warily over the groaning floorboards. Pushing open the door, I immediately sought the portrait. This time, equipped with a flashlight against the deeper gloom, I directed the beam onto the canvas. A subtle alteration registered. The outline defining the man's ears seemed sharper, possessing a newfound clarity I couldn't recall from my initial viewing. The shading along his neck, too, appeared more pronounced. A strange dissonance prickled my senses, as if the artist had returned in my absence to refine his work. I stood motionless, questioning my memory. My notes mentioned the blank face, yes, but nothing about ears or enhanced shadows. My pulse climbed again. Tentatively, I touched the canvas. The paint felt cold, dry, inert. Yet the difference persisted. A cursory check confirmed the other shrouded frames remained undisturbed. A creeping sensation of being observed intensified, despite the profound solitude. Only the creak of old wood and the distant rhythmic drip of water broke the silence. An urgency to depart seized me. I captured several photographs of the painting with my phone, intending a comparison later, then retreated from the building. That night, the dream recurred. The faceless man occupied the familiar void, but now, a slight protuberance marred the blankness where his nose should be, as if surfacing from beneath the canvas skin. He turned his head fractionally, and in the dream state, my hands began to tremble. A constricting pressure tightened around my chest. I woke gasping, bolt upright in bed, drenched. My heart thrashed. Fumbling for my phone, I scrutinized the photos from that afternoon. Zooming in confirmed it. The ears were indeed nascently defined, outlines emerging from the smooth paint. Nausea churned within me. Forsaking further investigation for the night, I sought refuge in the mindless flicker of late-night television until a fragile calm returned. For my third visit, I arrived earlier, hoping bright morning light might dispel the encroaching unease. Inside, however, the dimness prevailed, dust motes performing a slow ballet in the shafts of weak sun piercing the grime-coated windows. I moved swiftly towards the gallery, flashlight beam preceding me. Directed at the portrait, the light revealed another change. Faint ridges now hinted at cheekbones. The line of the jaw seemed stronger, more defined. A wave of visceral dread washed over me. Stepping closer, I discerned the barest suggestion of eyes, not formed, but shadowed depressions where they belonged. My legs felt unsteady. I instinctively took a step back. My breathing grew shallow, my throat constricted. Phone raised, my hand shook uncontrollably as I snapped more pictures, taking several for surety. Then I fled. No further checks, no lingering glances at other rooms. I burst out into the open air, scrambled into my car, and sat gripping the wheel for several minutes before finding the strength to turn the key. Sweat slicked my palms. I desperately needed air, cracking the window, gulping deep breaths. My mind raced, grappling with the impossibility of a painting altering itself. The nocturnal vision returned. This time the man possessed partial eyes, like incompletely formed orbs staring out from the canvas. He regarded me, though pupils and irises remained absent. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Fear radiated outwards, chilling my limbs. I awoke to a throbbing headache. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection startled me. Eyes bloodshot, face drawn and pale. For a fleeting, horrifying instant, I saw a resemblance to the emergent features in the painting. I recoiled, splashing cold water on my face, banishing the thought. I contacted my supervisor, Elias, fabricating a rationale for rejecting the building. Structural instability, water damage, inadequate lighting. The painting remained my unspoken secret. He accepted my assessment, urging me to finalize the report. Disconnecting, I knew one final visit was unavoidable. I had to witness it one last time. My fourth visit commenced late morning. The hallway air hung heavier, cloying with intensified mustiness. Each step towards the gallery was tense, my stomach churning, palms damp. Entering the room, I aimed the flashlight beam. The transformation was nearly complete. The man's face now bore distinct features. My features. My eyes stared back from the canvas, the shape of my nose, the curve of my jaw, even my hairline mirrored. An icy paralysis gripped my chest. The impulse to destroy the canvas warred with the urge to flee, yet I remained rooted to the spot. My breathing hitched. I lifted my phone, bracing my trembling arm against the wall to steady the shot. After capturing several images, I began backing away. A faint, dry scraping sound arrested my movement. I froze, heart thundering in my ears. A frantic scan revealed nothing amiss, yet the noise felt intimately close, emanating from the floorboards or perhaps behind the wall itself. I exited the gallery swiftly, resisting the urge to break into a run down the corridor. Outside, the daylight felt alien. Dizziness washed over me. Collapsing into my car, I gripped the steering wheel. The image seared into my mind. My own face, rendered with those blank, vacant eyes. That night, sleep in my own apartment felt impossible. I packed an overnight bag, checking into an anonymous motel miles away, seeking to sever the connection, break the cycle of dreams. I forced myself awake past midnight, watching meaningless videos until exhaustion claimed me. It was futile. The dream found me. The man in the painting was now my perfect duplicate, save for his eyes, opaque white orbs, devoid of pupil or color, fixed upon me with unnerving intensity. I awoke in the sterile motel room, heart galloping, throat tight. My hands clenched tightly around the thin sheets. The following morning brought resolve. I composed a concise report for Elias, reiterating the fabricated structural concerns, deeming the building unsuitable and the gallery space inadequate. The portrait remained unmentioned. Then, I gathered my belongings, loaded my car, and drove. Not towards home, but away, putting miles between myself and that place. I sought refuge at a friend's apartment in a city 2 hours distant. The remainder of the day was spent in determined distraction, consciously suppressing the memory, telling myself it was stress, imagination, hallucination. Yet every time I closed my eyes, the portrait materialized. My face, staring back with those chillingly blank eyes. Days have bled into one another since then. I haven't returned. I doubt I ever will. Occasionally, a disquieting certainty settles over me that the painting remains there, in the gloom of that abandoned gallery, waiting. My nights are still fractured by flashes of that evolving face. I cling to the hope that time and distance will eventually erode these nocturnal visitations, but the image itself is indelible. What it was, why it seemed to fixate on me, remains an enigma I lack the courage to pursue. All I possess is the certainty of the experience, and the lingering dread that surfaces whenever I close my eyes, recalling my own features emerging from that void. Possession came last month, not just of the deed, but of this quiet acreage cradled between low hills. The farmhouse, a pale ghost shedding flakes of paint, offered little promise beyond shelter. At the property's far reach stood the barn, canted slightly like an old man settling into his bones, yet sound enough for the detritus left behind. Rusted tools, splintered crates, and strata of dust awaiting my eventual attention. My ambitions were modest, evenings bathed in the liquid gold of sunset. Perhaps a meager return from the vast cornfield stretching away behind the barn. That sea of green was the true lure. Yet something snagged my gaze during that initial trek through the whispering stalks. Anchored in the field's precise heart, a scarecrow. Its garments, though tattered, clung with an unsettling propriety. The jacket collar framed its neck with intention. The trousers resisted gravity's pull. The hat perched too deliberately, as if tended, maintained. A fleeting thought dismissed then as fancy, attributing it to some long-departed tenant's lingering habit. My first exploration took me past it. It seemed to incline forward, its featureless head angled toward the distant farmhouse. A chill, cold and baseless, traced my spine. Absurd, just straw and sticks bound together. Faded burlap formed its face, punctured by stray strands of golden stuffing. Eyes like jet buttons, one fractured into a dark shard, stared blankly. A mouth stitched into a wry, unsettling line. A brief appraisal, then I moved on. It remained inert, a silent sentinel against the sky. Nights later, seeking solace in the small living room, windows flung open to the warm summer breath, the cornfield sang its usual song. But the familiar rustle felt altered, imbued with a subtle rhythm, a sibilance that prickled the skin along my arms. Not words, just an undercurrent, a conspiratorial whisper. Drawn to the back porch, I peered across the rippling expanse. Moonlight, thin and weak, silvered the swaying stalks. And there, stark against the shifting green, stood the silhouette. That central, unmoving shape. Squinting, I wrestled with perception. Had it turned, fully pivoted to face me. The distance, the gloom, rendered certainty impossible. A flutter in my chest, breath catching short. Exhaustion, I reasoned, driving me back inside to the futile security of a locked door. Just cloth, just straw, just wood. Sleep eventually claimed me on the worn couch. Before a supply run to town the following morning, duty pulled me toward the field. The crunch of earth under my boots punctuated the stillness. Reaching the center, I found the sentinel waiting. Something was wrong. The hat tilted differently, angled with an unnerving precision toward my path. Its arms seemed tucked closer, a subtle shift in posture. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cool morning air. Hesitantly, my fingers brushed the jacket. Dusty, the sleeves stitching frayed. I examined the post, testing its firmness in the soil. All appeared superficially sound. Then, the marks. Not my heavy tread, but smaller disturbances in the dirt circling the base. Scuffs, almost, as if something had dragged itself, leaving faint trails that vanished into the dense rows. My stomach tightened. Wind. Local youths indulging in mischief. Plausible deniability warred with a rising tide of unease. I'd seen no children, heard no trespassers. In town, procuring necessities, I exchanged pleasantries with a few locals. The property, they confirmed, had lain fallow for 2 decades. No one volunteered tales of scarecrows or inexplicable footprints. I held my tongue, unwilling to be branded the paranoid newcomer. Evening found me porch-bound once more, watching the sky bleed orange and violet. Cicadas thrummed their twilight chorus. The dry, sweet scent of corn husks drifted on the breeze. A magnetic pull urged me toward the field's heart, toward the silent figure, but the memory of those footprints held me captive. Darkness felt treacherous now. I would wait for daylight. Around 10, the house secured, I sought refuge in bed, leaving a window cracked for the night air. Sleep, I hoped, would be deep and undisturbed. But near midnight, a sound jolted me awake. A rustling, more vigorous than wind alone could explain, emanating from the field. Rising, I peered out. The moon, brighter now, cast long shadows across the yard. Beyond the first few ranks of corn, visibility dissolved. Then, a soft thud, muffled yet distinct, like something heavy meeting earth. My pulse leaped. Flashlight in hand, boots hastily pulled on. I stepped onto the porch, the night air thick and watchful. My legs felt leaden, breath ragged. The flashlight beam sliced into the darkness, illuminating the nearest stalks. They swayed, yes, but with a violence that suggested passage, not mere breeze. Hello. My voice, thin and reedy. Anyone there? Silence answered, save for a sudden gust that sent the corn into a frenzy. I stood frozen, indecision warring with fear. Then, a flicker of movement deep within, near the center. A rapid shift, a suggestion of rotation. The scarecrow's silhouette seemed to twist. My chest constricted. Listening intently, straining against the wind's roar, I caught a faint murmur, incoherent, fleeting. The flashlight trembled in my grip. Then, abrupt stillness, profound silence, broken only by the frantic rhythm of my own breathing. Retreating, I bolted the door, collapsing onto a kitchen chair, eyes fixed on the barrier between me and the rustling dark. Dawn found me sleepless. First light sent me stumbling back toward the field, limbs stiff, eyes gritty. Dew glittered on the leaves. Reaching the center, I stopped. The scarecrow seemed taller, perhaps an illusion of the nascent light. Its hat, undeniably, was canted toward my approach. The arms hung strangely, pulled downward, and wisps of straw protruded from rents in its torso, as if burst from within. The earth around its base bore fresh, shallow disturbances, drag marks. Impossible to say. Bending closer, I saw the mouth stitches had loosened, gaping slightly. A wave of nausea washed over me. I backed away, shaking my head, returning to the dubious sanctuary of the house. Chores became my shield that day. Cleaning the barn, stacking phantom hay, sorting forgotten tools. Hours of physical labor to occupy hands and mind. But as afternoon bled toward evening, the inevitable return of night and its sentinel loomed. A knot formed in my stomach, the memory of the trembling flashlight beam vivid. I resolved to inspect the field before sunset, seeking normalcy. Walking with determined strides, bathed in the slanted golden light filtering through the stalks, I approached the center and froze. The scarecrow was pitched forward, straining against its bonds, almost detached from the post. Arms outstretched, fabric ripped at the shoulders. The securing rope, though intact, hung slack. Fresh straw littered the ground beneath it. My throat constricted. Circling cautiously, maintaining maintaining distance. I saw the back. Long gashes marred the burlap. Deliberate slashes, not decay. Straw hemorrhaged from the wounds. The thrumming in my ears was my own blood. Sweat slicked my back. Tear it down. The impulse was strong, yet hesitation stayed my hand. Would that provoke something worse? The notion of a human interloper, a nocturnal vandal, offered a shred of rational comfort. It had to be someone. Marching to the barn, I returned with sturdy rope. I lashed the figure to the post anew, binding torso and arms with grim determination, cinching the knots until the wood groaned. A hollow laugh escaped me. Control asserted. Night fell heavy. The porch light cast a lonely circle of yellow. Flashlight and hammer lay ready by the back door. Meager talismans against the unknown. Windows sealed, doors double-checked. Around 9, the wind rose. I braced for the familiar chorus. Gentle at first, then swelling, intensifying. The porch light flickered erratically. Beneath the wind's howl, a scraping sound emerged, dragging, insistent. Pressure built in my chest. Stay calm. To the window, peering through a sliver in the curtains. Corn bending, thrashing. The scarecrow's position obscured. Swallowing hard, pulse accelerating. Then the thud, identical to the night before. Flashlight clutched tight. I unbolted the door and stepped onto the porch, leaving it ajar behind me. Boots heavy on the worn planks. The beam cut a swathe through the first rows. Stalks rustled violently left and right. Visibility ended mere feet ahead. Mouth dry, muscles coiled tight. A faint creaking reached me, rope under duress. Slowly, I swept the light. Movement. Left side. Beam snaps over, only wind-tossed corn. Then deeper in, I glimpsed the post. Stark. Empty. The scarecrow wasn't on it. Severed rope dangled, swaying gently, adorned with clinging bits of straw. Ice flooded my veins. 20 feet away, something shifted. A shape, crouched low amidst the stalks, indistinct in the gloom, obscured by the restless green curtain. I edged forward step by tentative step. Wind roared. Heart hammered against my ribs. My foot caught on unseen debris. I stumbled, the flashlight beam dancing wildly. By the time I regained balance, steadied the light. Nothing. Just swaying corn. The rope on the post hung still. The urge to flee screamed, but I held my ground, beam sweeping the silent rows. Gone. Hands shaking uncontrollably. Who's there? A cracked whisper lost in the wind. Only the wind replied. Slowly, deliberately, I backed toward the yard, flashlight beam fixed on the field's edge. Once on open ground, I turned, scrambled inside, slammed the door, threw the bolt. Breath came in ragged gasps, sweat cold on my skin, legs trembling. Lights off, I moved to a window overlooking the field, hiding behind the curtain, peering into the layered darkness. Mostly stillness, punctuated by wind-driven waves through the corn. The post remained bare. Hours passed in vigilant stillness. Every creak of the old house a jolt to my frayed nerves. Occasional flickers of movement out there. Wind. Or something else. My lungs felt tight, mind racing. Sunrise painted the scene in pale, indifferent hues. With trembling legs, I went outside. The central post stood solitary, stripped bare. Scraps of burlap littered the ground. The severed rope lay nearby. Straw clung like morbid confetti to the surrounding corn leaves. Gone. utterly. The only substantial remnant was the hat, lying face down in the dirt, a fresh tear marring its brim. I bent, picked it up. Musty, damp, wrong. The earth was disturbed, churned, as if something heavy had been dragged away, but no clear footprints remained. I still inhabit this place, still work the fields, but my senses remain perpetually heightened. The scarecrow never reappeared, not in pieces, not whole. Trespassers. A bizarre, protracted prank. Perhaps. But nothing else was ever disturbed. No further signs of intrusion found. Yet the image persists. That low shape in the corn. Watching. I avoid the field after dusk now. That feeling of being observed never truly left. Every sigh of wind through the stalks sends a jolt through me. Sometimes, standing on the porch, I scan the rose, half expecting to see it again, return to its post or lurking just beyond sight. The tension remains, but not deep in my gut. I don't know what vacated that post, what left those scraps behind. I won't seek it in the darkness. If it returns, I suppose I'll face it. Until then, I live with the echoes, the torn rope, the tattered fabric, and the vacant space where the scarecrow stood guard in the heart of my field. Sleep, for me, has always been a shallow pool, easily disturbed. Yet no ripple, no tremor from the waking world could have heralded the figure materializing at the threshold of my bedroom that night. A human outline, stark against the deeper gloom, motionless, observing. My sanctuary, my most intimate geography, breached, and with it, the naive conviction that my life belonged solely to me. The clock beside my bed pulsed 2:37. Wednesday had already begun its quiet trespass into Tuesday's domain. I surfaced abruptly, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, an instinct older than reason, screaming wrongness, before my eyes even registered the cause. My vision swam, adjusting to the familiar nocturne of my apartment, and there it was. Not a dream fragment clinging to consciousness, but a solid obstruction in the open doorway, tall, attenuated, utterly still. The hall beyond lay unlit, rendering the shape a void cut from the lesser dark, a tear in the fabric of my known space. Breath locked in my lungs, a fragile hope. Stillness might grant invisibility. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. Intruder, voyeur, some lost soul adrift in the night. None offered solace. The seconds dilated, stretching into an elastic eternity. Was this phantasm born of sleeplessness, a specter woven from fatigue? Yet the certainty of being seen, a palpable pressure in the darkness, belied illusion. Slowly, a glacial movement, my fingers crept across the sheet toward the cool promise of my phone on the nightstand, my digital lifeline. A subtle shift in the silhouette, a recalculation of weight, halted my hand inches from salvation. One step it took, into the room proper. A strangled cry clawed its way up my throat, but before sound could break the spell, a voice, low and raspy like stones grinding together, commanded the silence. Still. A single word heavy with implicit threat. No sound. Attend. Against all instinct, I submitted. What armament had I against the unknown? He stood sentinel between me and escape. I have observed you, Clara, he rasped, and the sound of my name on those those lips was a violation colder than any trespass. My blood turned to ice water. This was no random encounter. This was intimate terror. Your rhythms are known to me. The solitary existence, the quiet hours amongst books, the Friday ritual of spiced noodles. Nausea churned as he unspooled the mundane threads of my life, weaving them into a tapestry of intrusion. How long? How had I remained so blind to this parasitic observation? What purpose? The question emerged, a frayed whisper, barely audible above my own frantic pulse. So, he advanced again, a slow encroachment, forcing me back against the headboard, a cornered animal. Understanding, he breathed, the word less an answer than a pronouncement. For you to perceive as I perceive, to hold the knowledge I hold. Before the echo of his cryptic words faded, before comprehension could dawn on the precipice of this madness, a hand reached. Not for me, but for the wall switch. I flinched, bracing for the glare, the sudden, awful revelation of the face behind the voice. Light exploded into the room, painfully bright, and the space where he had stood held nothing but empty air. Blinking against the sudden brilliance, disorientation washed over me. Had the darkness birthed a hallucination? A waking terror conjured from the depths of my own mind? My fingers, trembling uncontrollably, found my phone, dialing the emergency sequence. A disembodied call on the line anchored me as I stammered out the impossible narrative. Soon, the night outside pulsed with familiar blue and red. Uniformed figures moved through my apartment, their flashlights slicing through shadows, their search methodical, thorough. Yet, nothing. No splintered wood, no jimmied lock, no prints alien to my own on any surface. Their professional courtesy was edged with polite skepticism. Another midnight phantom conjured by solitude. But the residue of fear, cold and electric in my veins, was proof enough. He was real. Sleep was banished utterly. I spent the remaining hours huddled in the stark glare of the living room lamp, a paring knife clutched like a useless talisman in my white-knuckled grip. Dawn arrived not as relief, but as a pale, exhausted witness to my vigil. I feigned illness to my work at the archives, dedicating the day instead to fortifying my violated space. Deadbolts multiplied, electronic eyes were mounted, alarms wired, a frantic, inadequate bulwark against the intangible. For weeks, normalcy was a forgotten country. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker in my peripheral vision, sent jolts of adrenaline through me. My established routines dissolved into unpredictable patterns. My reflection constantly checked the space behind me, in shop windows and polished surfaces. The watcher remained unseen, unheard. A month dissolved. A fragile sense of security began to tentatively reassert itself, the memory blurring at the edges like a poorly fixed photograph. Perhaps it had been a fever dream, a stress-induced fugue. Then, returning one evening, weary, anticipating the solace of lamplight and printed words, I saw it. Propped against my door, stark white against the dark wood, a small envelope. No postmark, no sender. Only my name, Clara, inscribed in thin, angular script that seemed to crawl suddenly clumsy and cold, tore it open. Inside, a single sheet. 5 words that froze the marrow in my bones. I remain observant. Do you? The constabulary offered little more than sympathetic shrugs this time. No prints, no leads. A cruel jest, they theorized, by someone aware of my previous distress. But the certainty resonated deep within me. This was his signature, his chilling postscript. An obsession took root, thorny and consuming. Every passerby became a potential mask, every patron at the archives a subject of intense, covert scrutiny. I escalated my surveillance, adding cameras until my apartment felt like a stage under constant, invisible direction. Each night became a ritual of reviewing the day's silent film, searching hours of empty corridors and street corners for a flicker, a discrepancy, a shadow out of place. Weeks bled into months. No further missives arrived. No spectral figures materialized in doorways. Yet the sensation persisted. A heavy cloak of unseen scrutiny, suffocating, inescapable. Concern etched lines on the faces of my friends, whispers of paranoia, gentle suggestions of seeking help. Perhaps they saw the truth I couldn't face, but how to articulate the chilling reality of an invisible, omniscient watcher who knew the geography of my soul, who could dissolve into light. Precisely 1 year after the night my sanctuary was breached, I walked home, twilight bleeding into the cityscape, thoughts adrift, a flicker in a shop window's polished surface, a half-caught silhouette, hauntingly familiar in its lean stillness. I pivoted, heart seizing. The pavement stretched vacant behind me. Puzzled, I turned back to the glass. My own reflection stared back, pale and tired. And there, hovering just behind my mirrored shoulder, impossibly close, stood a tall, lean darkness, where no physical body cast a shadow. A gasp, another frantic turn, yielding only emptiness. When my gaze returned to the window, the phantom echo was gone, and understanding dawned, cold and absolute. He wasn't coming back. He had never left. Always there, just beyond the veil of perception, a silent partner to my solitude. That night, I dismantled my fortress. The cameras came down, their lenses like blind eyes. The manuals for alarms and locks joined the refuse. Futile gestures. Barriers are meaningless to one who traverses thresholds unseen. He required no key. He was already inside the perimeter of my fear. Even now, pen scratching across this page, I feel the weight of his attention. Not a physical presence, no breath stirring the air, but an undeniable polarity, a constant, silent witness, watching, waiting. For what purpose I cannot fathom. Perhaps one night the silhouette will solidify once more in my doorway. Perhaps this time, light will reveal motive, bestow identity, answer the screaming, why? Or perhaps he will remain this elusive pressure, this haunting resonance at the edge of awareness, a perpetual testament to the flimsy illusion of sanctuary we cling to, the fragile membrane between the known and the observed. So, should you stir in the deep hours, sensing an unseen gaze pierce the darkness, should a flicker in the periphery resolve into a shape that logic denies, recall this account. Know that the monsters are not confined to childhood closets or the space beneath the bed. Sometimes they occupy the familiar frame of your own door, observing, eternally observing, and all that remains is to meet their gaze across the void.